And now for more on this, we're being joined by our Voice of America correspondent, Jessica Stone. We're also joined by Dov Zakheem, Senior Advisor at Center for Strategic and International Studies, and also the former Undersecretary of Defense in George W. Bush administration. He is joining us live from Washington, D.C. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, sir, I want to come to you first. Of course, former U.S. President Donald Trump has landed in Milwaukee, this merely a little over 24 hours after the assassination attempt. Now, I just want to understand, what's your assessment of what the mood is like in the RNC and in the United States? Is that of unity, anger? How do you think this will impact the discourse surrounding the elections as well?
Well, I think most Americans are shocked by what happened. What's interesting is that the three major newspapers in this country, the New York Times, which leans left, the Wall Street Journal, which leans right, and the Washington Post, which is moderately left, have all said the same thing in their editorials, namely that everybody has to calm down, just as the president said. The real problem here is not the vast middle that we have in this country, whether Republican or Democrat or independent. The real problem are the extremes on both sides. And the question is, are those people even listening to what the president, or for that matter, Mr. Trump, who's talked about unity, have said today? That has been the fundamental problem all along, that there are extremes here that simply excite everyone else and are total ideologues. And we've already seen this in the conspiracy theories that both sides are coming up with. The Republicans say, well, you know, this is a way to eliminate Trump because, after all, they've tried to hound him out of the campaign through the courts and through attempted convictions. The Democrats, some of them, the extremists, are saying that this whole thing is a put-up job, that, in fact, there wasn't really an attack on Trump and it was just a way to make him into a martyr. Those kinds of people who believe that kind of garbage, it's not clear to me that anything the president or Trump or anyone else who's responsible says to them will be listened to at all.
Right, sir. Coming to you, Jessica, just a short while ago, we heard President Biden rallying around unity at the presidential speech from the Oval Office. Talk to us about how the assassination attempt on Trump is shaping the campaigning events for Republicans and Democrats.
Well, there's two buckets, right? There's the rhetorical response and there is the security response at a minimum. And rhetorically, we saw President Biden use a rare primetime address, 6 minutes in length, to talk about uniting the country, to talk about lowering the temperature of the rhetoric of political discourse. And we've also seen Donald Trump call for that in some of his Truth Social posts. And he just gave an interview to a reporter at the Washington Examiner, Selena Zito, who was at the Trump rally in which he was attacked. And he told her that he's going to use his speech, according to her words in her interview, that he is going to use his speech at the RNC this week to talk about unity. And it's unclear how much of that was going to be in his speech already. Obviously, he has to make the case for why he can win, for why he chose his vice president, for why his policies are superior to his opponents. But to have that opportunity, to use that opportunity to talk about uniting the country, that will be a really interesting listen, I think, for the country to understand what he means by unity and what that looks like, according to Donald Trump.
Right. Jessica, thank you so much for that. Just do stay on with us. Mr. Zakheem, coming back to you. Now, you've been the former Undersecretary of Defense in George W. Bush administration, one of the presidents who suffered who also was the victim of an assassination attempt in 2005. Almost a decade later, this is something that we're witnessing yet again. Now, I just want to understand, expanding on the point that you'd made earlier, how do you think political violence has reached its worst level? There's always this threat. How is there this persistent threat of political violence when it comes to campaign rallies?
Well, I think there are a couple of things. First, you have people who are simply stirred up by the wildest theories that they consume. We don't know what motivated this young man. He seems to have been quite intelligent. He won a science prize in school just a couple of years ago. We still don't know what motivated him. But we've seen this over and over again. I mean, it began, of course, with in recent history, as opposed to, say, Abraham Lincoln. But in recent history, you've seen John Kennedy, you've seen Robert Kennedy, you've seen Martin Luther King, you've seen the attack on Gerald Ford, you've seen the attack on Ronald Reagan. This just doesn't go away. The gun control advocates, of course, say that a lot of it has to do with no control of guns. Those who oppose that, of course, say people kill people, not guns kill people. I don't think that debate is going to get resolved by this. And I can only hope that, as Jessica just said, that what Mr. Trump says echoes what Mr. Biden said, and hopefully enough people will buy into that so that to some extent the political rhetoric will calm down. I just worry that it might not happen. And I can point, for instance, to Senator Vance, J.D. Vance, who started blaming the Democrats and the media and President Biden. I mean, if you talk that way, you're not going to calm anyone down.
Coming to you, Jessica, give us a rundown of the on-ground updates there. What can you tell us about the shooter, the victims, and the former U.S. President Trump as well? We do know that Trump has reached Milwaukee for the RNC convention.
Yes, and he explained why he sort of reneged on his initial reaction, which was to take a 2-day break and come later. In a Truth Social post, his competitor, of course, to Twitter, after having been kicked off Twitter during his administration, he says simply that he doesn't want to give the victory to the shooter and to let him and the actions that he took interrupt the presidential campaign for the presumed presidential nominee, Republican nominee. He did have the bullet graze his ear. He was treated medically, but he has expected to speak Thursday night at the RNC convention, take the nomination, announce his vice president. And in terms of what we know about the suspect, we've heard a little bit there from your other guests, but he's a 20-year-old young man by the name of Matthew Crooks. Authorities believe that he acted alone, that he used an AR-style semi-automatic rifle that was purchased illegally by his father, that he had bombs in his car, that he had explosives in his car that have been found. And so it's unclear what else he was planning to do, how he was planning to use those explosives, if he had other weapons on him at the time. We still have a lot to learn about this young man. People have described him from his neighborhood and his employer as someone that was nice and quiet. Others from his high school experience say that he was bullied, that he was a loner. And so we're trying to piece together what this young man was like, what he was influenced by, and what would lead him to climb up the side of a building and try to shoot a presidential candidate. So a lot left to be on the offing. And President Biden has ordered an investigation. He called it an independent investigation. Right. It's unclear who will administer that investigation. But there are already a congressional investigation that has been ordered. And of course, the FBI is investigating the full extent of what happened. There's also been independent calls for an investigation of the Secret Service itself, what failures it had, not having its own sniper on that roof that day.
Right, Jessica. There also seems to be a sense of unity right now in the United States of America as the country heads for the U.S. presidential polls. Thank you so much, Jessica, and thank you, Mr. Zakim, for joining us on World DNA with your insights on this. We'll, of course, be tracking the on-ground updates with you, Jessica, on the show.
Of course.
Thank you very much.